Hey everyone, Reed here with Big Strong Book, and today I'm going to be doing a spoiler discussion for Dune Part 2. So, given today, the movie should be out wide, so I figured it was time where more of a general audience has seen it. I'm not going to be giving a whole lot away days before the movie comes out, and of course, the book has been out for 60 years. Other adaptations have been out for decades, so I don't feel too bad about doing the spoiler review. And if I had put this up when I had first seen the movie, I doubt I would have felt guilty either. But I figured leave it for when it comes wide. So I don't feel like there are many spoilers that I have a pressing need to discuss. I feel like had I not liked the movie, there would be much more things to talk about and kind of dissect and get into. But there were a couple very interesting aspects to this movie that I remember being different in the book. Even though it's been a while since I've read it, and right now I'm in the process of starting to reread it, so some of it's coming back. But one of the things is an element that I've been waiting for, and everybody online, on people online debating what it was going to look like was Aaliyah. Obviously, the previous film made direct reference, through Paul's visions, when Paul confirming to his mother, "I know you're pregnant," and it's clear that she's very early on in the pregnancy. And we knew that with the time jump coming in part two, or what we assumed would be a significant time jump, we would see Aaliyah as she was in the book. Of course, there was speculation as to what that would look like. Would they would they keep elements of the character? Obviously, they mentioned she was pregnant, so they weren't doing away with that storyline entirely, and that would be a major affront to people who love the books, or people who've even just read the book and know of the plot would be very confused as to why you would leave, why that storyline would be on the cutting room floor. But we were wondering, okay, is this going to be CGI toddler, a la the Twilight movies, where you're kind of really stretching the audience's suspension of disbelief, even though the whole point of Aaliyah is that she is unsettling and disturbing. So a creepy, uncanny CGI baby, I think, or CGI toddler would, it wouldn't have to look perfect because that's the whole point. It's supposed to be strange and weird and unsettling. Um, we know what would that look like, and well, man, I wish that they had kept it secret who was playing Aaliyah, right up until the movie released. I know that they revealed it after the premiere, but of course, not really anybody from the general public outside of critics had seen it. And unfortunately, I feel like there could have been ways to avoid that if I hadn't looked that up online, or just looked to check showtimes for the movie and seen a news article that said, "Oh, Anya Taylor-Joy is confirmed to be in the cast," and Anya Taylor-Joy attended the premiere, so that kind of gave it away. Um, I think back to a couple times recently where big movies that I was really looking forward to seeing, and movie sequels. I don't love by any means the Star Trek sequel trilogy. However, I remember going when, seeing The Last Jedi opening night and being shocked that Yoda was in the movie and that it was a puppet, and that Frank Oz was back doing the voice. That was shocking in kind of a good way, even though I, do not love that movie at all. I like that I was genuinely caught off guard by that, and likewise when Harrison Ford makes a cameo appearance in the Rise of Skywalker, that didn't get out at all. So I was disappointed that it was revealed, and it wasn't like it was a big leak. I mean, what then started to leak was how that they were then going to incorporate Aaliyah into the story. That's what started to leak afterwards. And that was probably uh, partly on me. Like I just went looking into internet threads and then and most of those leaks turned out to be true, or most of that discussion turned out to be true. Elements of it did not. They said that, oh, Aaliyah will be in the womb the whole movie and she'll be talking and communicating to Jessica, and Jessica will kill the Baron. Well, of course, in the film, Paul kills the Baron. Um, but I liked, I will say that there still was the weirdness factor to it with the shots where it would go to the embryo and the fetus, and that was unsettling. And I'm sure at the beginning of the movie, when you get that first shot of the little embryo, people in the audience were kind of looking and being like, "What?" People who who weren't familiar with the story were wondering, what the hell? Like, why are they showing us an embryo? It's weird. Um, so I think I've come around to it a little more. I get that it would have been tough, and there would be a fine line between pulling off Aaliyah as written in the book. Fine line between doing it well, or you're either going to do it well or you're going to fail miserably. I don't think there would have been any middle ground, and I think Denis Villeneuve, the other screenwriters, would have said, like it's a, we don't want to make this concession, but we have, like, for the purposes of this movie, because it could pull down the gravitas of the movie if we do it like it is in the book and get it wrong. That could be part of the case. Anyway, part of the positive of that, uh, you know, it Jessica, as she's starting to converse with fetus Aaliyah, is, that's when the change starts to happen in Jessica, and that's in turn when the path of the change within Paul starts to change. I think that Paul's shift in this movie was one of my favorite parts. Of course, the visuals and all of that were great, and the themes were great, and the themes tie in directly to Paul's journey as a character. And I like the direction where, and I know I'm getting a little off track from the Aaliyah thing, but it kind of ties into that. When he starts to experience those visions and when he takes the water of life towards the end of the movie, and there is that complete change within him, and he becomes Muad'Dib, and he becomes fully the Kwisatz Haderach, and um, as and he loses a part of himself. You can see the moment in the movie as he wakes up from the water of life when he has lost his humanity, and I really like that. And I kind of remember that in the book of being perturbed, I think, a little, that Paul was becoming this messianic figure, but that's the whole point of the story, and I can really appreciate that now. And I think, again, going back to Aaliyah, so I'll just kind of wrap up that by saying I liked the vision with Anya Taylor-Joy, and it was good for building, I think, hype for a third movie, for the adaptation of Dune Messiah. Um, so I'm starting to come around to it, and from what I read online, again, it's been a long time since I've read the book, but when Paul kills the Baron and he says, "Hello, grandfather," I didn't realize that is a reference to the book, in which Paul sees the many futures, and he sees himself either killing the Baron or confronting the Baron and saying, "Hello, grandfather." So it's a reference to that. So part of it's still in line with the book, even though, Aaliyah actually kills the Baron. Paul just sees himself killing the Baron as a vision, but it's reality in this adaptation. Um, Anyway, going back to Paul, One of the things that I don't really remember as happening in the book is the big split of the Fremen between, I mean, in this movie, this is personified by Stilgar, as he's like, no, Paul is the Lisan al Gaib, and Stilgar are representing uh, the more faithful side, or the believers, and Chani and kind of her friend group. I forget, oh gosh, I forget the name of the actress and the name of the character. That's kind of Chani's Fremen best friend in the movie. I forget her name and her character's name. But they're the non-believers. But and there's something to be said of, it's and it presents it as a generational gap too. They're they've wisened up to what the Bene Gesserit, what the mission, protective are, whatever that's called, about their strategies, and with it being clear of that the Bene Gesserit are, um, they're going to these great lengths to, um, to prepare the way, um, and control these populations. And it's interesting to see, parts of the Fremen wisening up to that. I'm sure that's in the book at some level. I just don't remember that. So feel free to say in the comments if that's in the book, where it's evident. Again, I'm starting to reread it now. I'm not too far into it, so I'm sure I'll get to that if it is in there, and it'll be pretty evident. But I like that, and in turn, that's what made me really like, Zendaya in this movie as Chani. Uh, being going from the non-believer to then over the course of the movie starting to be a believer, and then you get to the end when Paul makes his pronouncement to the emperor and says, I wish to wed your daughter, and I will rule as emperor. um and I remember when I read the book a long time ago, being surprised by that. But again, that was me being surprised without really thinking about it and being like, well, that's Paul made that decision because, um, he made that decision because it was for, uh, political purposes. It was a strategic marriage. It wasn't one necessarily out of love. Um, and then the decision to have, uh, Shawnee at the end, um, walk out of the residency and go into the desert and prepare to ride a sandworm. While I don't think that that's in the book, if I remember correctly, I really enjoyed that. And that was the thing where I thought I had seen it online, maybe people addressing that and saying, well, while it may not have been literally in the text, it was certainly implied. Um, and I think that that was important because I think that stays true to Herbert's themes as I understand them. You know, removed from the series, not a fan of it because I haven't read all the books. Um, but had had we not, I think we had to see that kind of visceral, visible reaction from Chani. If we didn't, I don't think I think this movie would have had a harder time going into Messiah because it's 100% clear, not only from the reaction that Chani has to Paul in that final scene, but um, but in how Paul acts throughout the whole last act after he takes the water of life. If we didn't have that complete change, because now it's clear to even members of the audience who have no prior familiarity to the story, it is clear, or it should be clear, that this is a this is a tragic story. When it comes down to it, it's a tragic cautionary story, and it nails that point, I think, with the ending. you know I know that the history will remember us as wives line isn't in there. um, elements of the ending. If that is the final line of the book, I don't even remember. Um, I get that that part of the ending isn't in there, but I like with I think it worked. It paired well with the visuals. With the Fremen kind of getting on the ships and going. With the members of the Landsraad that are kind of in orbit as they refuse to accept Paul's ascendancy. I think it was important to have that, and I think that was an important change and a good change. But I knew right away seeing it, I'm like, oh, this might piss off some people. Um, a few other things. So a couple things that have no, I wouldn't say angered, but displeased fans of the book. As I was just kind of reading through discussion boards online, was the exclusion of Stephen McKinley Henderson, I think is the actor's name, as Thufir Hawat. And I, I knew that he was supposed to be in the movie, but I didn't realize until seeing those posts that he wasn't in the movie. I was never like, oh, where's Thafir Hawat? Where's this character? I think because I was always engaged with the story, and there was never a moment where I'm like, oh, something's missing here. It would have been cool to see, and Tim Blake Nelson was apparently in the movie. Think his scenes were cut. Rumor has it he was going to play Count Fenring. Um, so I mean, cut for time, cut for, you know, just for the pace of the movie, that might have been it. More than just I'm sure that they were great scenes. It was just the matter of pacing the movie, and this movie is really well paced, and there were, or mainly because I was trying to think of the whole time, I was surprised that for this movie we spend so much of it, of the from when it starts. It's I don't even know exactly when in the movie it was. It felt like it was well over halfway through before we got Fade Rotha and more of the Emperor and Irulan. I felt like it was a long time, and I was surprised. I thought that they would have intercut more between uh the two spheres of the story. But again, as I said in my other review, they were probably, staying true to the spirit of the books, where the focus is Paul and the Fremen and the Fedukan, and it's all of those, um it's those storylines that are the attention. And this probably was true to the book, where yeah, it's they're in there, but they're a very 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 minor focus until the end, when it all culminates, when the emperor and his court arrive on Arrakis. Um and as I mentioned in my spoiler free review, yeah, the third act, I feel like a lot of people, or some people, commented on it seeming rushed. And I don't see the third act of this movie as rushed, more as it was the explosive release of the propulsive energy that had been building up for, by that point, probably an hour 45, hour 55 minutes. Then you have this huge uh, third act that works so well, or at least I thought it worked tremendously well. And this, even though it ends on a cliffhanger, just as part one did, it is a different sort of cliffhanger. It is a cliffhanger that is, I think, true in spirit to how the book ended, as I remember it. Um, but it's one that it affirms the themes of the series completely, because it's not all that evident. I mean, it's hinted at in part one. Of course, when you have the scene after Paul and Jessica have been kidnapped by the Harkonnen troops, and the ornithopters crash landed, and then they're in a tent in the desert for the night, and there's spice in the tent, and Paul sees another vision, and he sees the vision of the jihad, of the holy war, and he is terrified of that. Whatever he says, millions of people screaming my name, and it horrifies him. That image horrifies him. So it's but then again, you don't an unfamiliar viewer would maybe be like, well, maybe that's not predicting the future. Maybe it's different because after all, there were the visions with Jamis that he sees. Um, but he kills Jamis in the duel at the end of part one. Um, and so I think, it perturbed me to see the criticisms of part one uh when they said, "Oh, it's just enough, like it's just a white savior story. This is, just that this is bad. It's problematic." But then it's like, no, it's a this whole thing is a commentary on charismatic leaders, on prophecy, on religion, on a whole spectrum of schools of thought and idea. Like it's a commentary on that. It is advocating truly for the balanced mind to proceed forward, not to get swept up in this charisma. And that is the tragedy. And what makes it so good and complex in part two is that Paul wants revenge for his father. He wants that. He feels like he needs it, but he doesn't want to become a messiah, like this messianic figure. But then he kind of gives over to that, and he's fully enveloped within that. And while he's kind of amid the aura of that, the others around him, like Chani at the end, are seeing the scary side. She is now seeing the scary side that Paul saw at the end of part one. And yeah, and so it furthers the ending of part two, furthers the propulsive energy from the first two acts of the movie directly into what we will hopefully get, which is an adaptation of Dune Messiah, and a Dune 3, a Dune Part 3, or if they'll call it Dune Messiah or Dune Part 3 or whatever. Um, but yeah, I just and some articles that I've seen of part two, the biggest thing that it's some of these like opinion columnists and whatever, they say, that the story misses the mark by telling a story of freedom, of kind of like a tribal group of people, but it's just a tired old story because there's a white. So they recycle the white savior line, which we know not to be the case. And that is affirmed, I think, within part two, that it is most definitely not a white savior narrative. It is directly critiquing that trope. It is using that trope to then critique it. Layers of complexity, I think, that I didn't appreciate when I read the book, but now that I can see it in front of me, that's why I'm just very excited to fully reread the book and continue on to the others in the series. But then these articles, in addition to recycling the debate, it's not even really a debate. It's just them kind of thinking that this is a white savior narrative. And then I think the next, yeah, again, like they're saying, it tells the same old story of power, that directly linking it to, you know, to the freedom of tribal groups. But it's like, again, these people that the Dune saga is about power, and it's not meant to necessarily to be an affirmation. I mean, there is part of that, of an affirmation of kind of the Fremen people rising up and upsetting the balance for the great houses that are in control, but it doesn't seek to just do that. It's more complex. And I know that there are some people who have come around who criticized part one for being a white savior narrative, or what they perceived to be one, and then and then people were saying, just wait, part two, like this is, it seems that way, but it's setting up the trope to then directly go against it, or at least to very much so critique it, and I think that is evident both in the shift in Timothy Chalamet, and that's, his performance is great in this movie, but again, the heart and soul of this is Zendaya's performance as Chani is just amazing because she is, in many respects, she is the audience. She is the audience's perspective, because she is, criticizing. She is criticizing this white savior narrative. She is criticizing, and she's being like, no, it's just like it doesn't make any sense. Like somebody would come from the outside and would help us. She's critiquing that, but then as she's pulled over, she's like, well, maybe Paul is a sort of Messiah figure. Maybe he can help us. Maybe this, maybe that. And then she's seeing the consequences, or she is foreseeing, or just, extrapolating what the consequences of such a thing will be, and is mortified by it. And so that's what I'm really excited to see fully come about, and hopefully in a part three. So, long-winded spoiler review. I'm sure there's so much more that I could talk about, but I think those are the biggest points. So if you have seen Dune Part 2, let me know what you think, and I will see you guys next time.